All right, let's get into this. We're going to explore a really powerful and honestly kind of mind-bending idea that hope, the one thing we all cling to in the dark, can actually hurt before it ever has a chance to heal. We're always taught that hope is this pure, positive force, right? It's the light at the end of the tunnel. But what if it's not always that simple? This whole explainer is about a unique and tragic situation where the return of hope was met not with joy, but with absolute terror.
So, to really understand this, we have to go right to the edge, to the final days before liberation. This is the moment when the end of suffering became its own kind of terrifying new beginning.
And this is where our own expectations just get completely flipped upside down. I mean, just try to imagine it. After years of enduring the absolute worst, the first real sign of freedom appears. You'd think that would bring a massive wave of relief, wouldn't you? But for these prisoners, it was the exact opposite. Hope felt dangerous. It felt like an invader in a system that had shut down all emotion just to survive. So what in the world is happening here, psychologically? Well, it's something called psychological dissonance. The easiest way to think about it is like this. To survive, these people had to build a fortress in their minds. And the main foundation of that fortress was one single powerful belief. There is no hope. It was a defense mechanism. So when the possibility of freedom, this powerful contradictory new information, came crashing against that fortress, the internal conflict was so extreme that it caused real mental anguish.
And that internal battle, it morphs into something even deeper. It becomes a fear, not of more suffering, but a fear of disappointment on a scale so massive they just couldn't risk it.
And here's the key. These individuals had become experts at surviving. They knew how to endure pain, they knew that landscape. But this new, fragile little thing called hope, that was completely unknown territory. To actually let yourself feel it, to let yourself believe in it after everything, and then to risk having it snatched away again, that was a potential pain that was far more terrifying than anything they'd already faced.
And this is the question that just haunted them. It made them tremble. Just let that sink in for a second. The sheer weight of that thought after everything they'd been through. What if this hope, like every other, collapses? It's just devastating. So, what happens when the hope doesn't collapse? When freedom is suddenly real and it's right there? Well, this is where we see this absolutely staggering gap between what we all imagine freedom feels like and what it actually was for them.
The contrast is just jarring. We expect pure, unfiltered joy. The reality was overwhelming fear. We anticipate this deep, profound sense of relief. What they actually experienced was physiological shock. We imagined this moment of final triumphant strength, but they were just consumed by this incredible fragility. The release wasn't a relief at all. It was a total system overload.
And it is so crucial to understand that this was a physical reaction, not just an emotional one. For years, every nerve, every single heartbeat, every thought was dialed into a state of extreme survival. You can't just flip a switch on that. The sudden change wasn't a gentle ramp-up. It was a violent shock to a system that was completely unprepared for it.
Which leads us to maybe the most tragic irony of this entire experience. A moment where the human spirit and the physical body were completely, tragically out of sync.
In that instant of liberation, something that had been buried so deep inside them finally wakes up. The soul, the part of them that held on to memories of art and love and their own identity, the part they had to suppress to survive, it suddenly just surges back to life.
But the body, this vessel that was so weakened and conditioned by years of hardship, it just couldn't handle that sudden, powerful rush. It was simply too much, too fast. And the consequences of this disconnect were absolutely heartbreaking. That immense emotional release acted as a literal physical shockwave. For some, the very heart that had somehow kept on beating through years of unimaginable torture gave out in the instant of freedom. They died in the exact moment they were saved. Now, for those who did survive this initial shock, the struggle was far from over. A new, much quieter, and in some ways an even more challenging chapter was just beginning. The chapter on how to live again. That phrase from the source material, with trembling hearts. Wow, it just captures it perfectly, doesn't it? Their first steps into this new free world weren't these triumphant strides. They were uncertain,
shaky steps into a world they didn't recognize. As people, they no longer knew how to be.
So what does that path to healing even look like? I mean, there's no map for this, but it seems to involve these absolutely monumental tasks. First, you have to confront a world that just moved on without you. Then begins the painstaking process of reclaiming an identity that was systematically erased. And finally, maybe the hardest step of them all, learning how to hold on to hope again, but this time without the terror that it's going to be ripped away.
And that brings us to our final thought. This one question really wraps up the whole paradox we've been talking about. How do you recover when the very thing you longed for, freedom, release, hope, is itself a source of profound pain? It's a really humbling reminder that the journey to healing, it's rarely what we expect it to be.